a petty hat is no cure for a homely face. If one really wants to solve life's problems, one should live simply and reserve the major portions of one's life for loving service to Krishna. Even those who do not serve God receive a certain standard of maintenance from Him. Therefore, we can just imagine the security the Lord affords to those who dedicate their lives to His devotional service. Text 2. Following the example of the python, one should give up material endeavors and accept for one's maintenance food that comes of its own accord, whether such food be delicious or tasteless, ample or meager. If at any time food does not come, then a saintly person should fast for many days without making endeavor. He should understand that by God's arrangement he must fast. Thus, following the example of the python, he should remain peaceful and patient. Purport. If by God's arrangement one is forced to suffer material hardship, then one should think, due to my past sinful activity, I am now being punished in this way. God is mercifully making me humble. The word, nor is his spiritual knowledge lost. Thus he is akshobhya, or undisturbed. His mind is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is a reservoir of unlimited spiritual bliss. And having linked his consciousness with the Supreme Consciousness, his knowledge cannot be measured. A pure devotee, having taken shelter of the Lord's lotus feet, possesses great spiritual power, and therefore he cannot be surpassed or overwhelmed. In fact, having developed his spiritual body, he is not affected by the deteriorating actions of time. Although outwardly he is friendly and pleasing to everyone, internally his mind is fixed in the absolute truth, and no one can understand his actual purpose or plan. Even the most intelligent human being cannot understand the mental activities of a self-realized devotee who has given up material life based on lust and greed and taken shelter at the lotus feet of the Lord. Such a great soul can be compared to the mighty ocean. Innumerable powerful rivers plunge into the ocean, but the ocean remains calm and peaceful. Thus a saintly person is understood to be like the ocean, pleasing, unfathomable, grave, unsurpassable, unlimited, and unshakable. During the rainy season, the swollen rivers rush into the ocean, and during the dry summer, the rivers, now shallow, severely reduce their supply of water. Yet the ocean does not swell up during the rainy season, nor does it dry up in the hot summer. In the same way, a saintly devotee who has accepted the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the goal of his life sometimes will receive, by providence, great material opulence, and sometimes he will find himself materially destitute. However, such a devotee of the Lord does not rejoice in a flourishing condition, nor is he morose when poverty is stricken. A sincere devotee of the Lord is always eager to meet the Lord and render him transcendental service. He wants to remain fixed as an atom at the lotus feet of the Lord, because Lord Krishna, or Narayana, is the reservoir of all pleasure. He rejoices when experiencing pure Krishna consciousness, and is morose when Krishna is not present in his mind. In his dealings with the material world, a devotee cannot be disturbed by ordinary materialistic people, who sometimes insult him and accuse him of neglecting material sense gratification, just as the ocean cannot be disturbed by the innumerable rivers that enter into it. Sometimes lusty women approach a pure devotee, and sometimes speculative philosophers try to argue against the personality of Godhead. But with all such ordinary people, a pure devotee is detached and undisturbed in his blissful Krishna consciousness. One who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles coquettishly, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence. Just as a moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. Srila Sridhar Swami explains in this regard that just like a moth is killed by its attraction to the form of fire, similarly a bee can easily be killed by exploiting its attraction to the fragrance of flowers. Furthermore, hunters may trap and kill an elephant by exploiting its sensuous desire to touch a captive female elephant, and may also kill a deer by attracting it with the sounds of their horns. And a fish is killed by its desire to taste the bait on a hook. Thus, one who desires to learn detachment from material illusion should accept these 5 helpless creatures as guru and learn the needful. Certainly one who is lusty to enjoy the illusory form of woman will be quickly buried in material illusion. Of the 5 types of fatal attraction involving material sense objects, the lesson of rupa or form is illustrated in this verse. One who has failed to control his senses immediately feels attraction upon seeing a woman's form, which is created by the illusory energy of the Supreme Lord. Indeed, when the woman speaks with enticing words, smiles coquettishly, and moves her body sensuously, his mind is immediately captured, and thus he falls blindly into the darkness of material existence, just as a moth, maddened by the fire, rushes blindly into its flames. Purport. Srila Sridhar Swami explains in this regard that just as a moth is killed by its attraction to the form of fire, similarly a bee can easily be killed by exploiting its attraction to the fragrance of flowers. Similarly, hunters may trap and kill an elephant by exploiting its sensuous desire to touch a captive female elephant, and may also kill a deer by attracting it with the sounds of their horns. And a fish is killed by its desire to taste the bait on a hook. Thus one who desires to learn detachment from material illusion should accept these 5 helpless creatures as guru and learn the needful. Certainly one who is lusty to enjoy the illusory form of a woman will be quickly buried in material illusion. Of the 5 types of fatal attraction involving material sense objects, the lesson of rupa or form is illustrated in this verse. A foolish person with no intelligent discrimination is immediately aroused at the sight of a lusty woman, beautifully decorated with golden ornaments, fine clothing, and other cosmetic features. Being eager for sense gratification, such a fool loses all intelligence and is destroyed, just like the moth who rushes into the blazing fire. Actually, women have the power to attract men through all of the material senses. Men become lusty by seeing the body of a woman, by smelling her fragrance, by hearing her voice, by tasting her lips, by touching her body. However, the foolish relationship based on material sense attraction begins by seeing, and thus rupa or form is very prominent in the process of ruining one's intelligence. This fact has been exploited in modern times by huge pornography industries which prey on unfortunate men and women. The example of the foolish moth rushing into the fire and destroying itself is most appropriate in this regard. For one who becomes addicted to the momentary pleasure of sex indulgence certainly loses his power to understand the spiritual reality behind dull matter. A saintly person should accept only enough food to keep his body and soul together. He should go from door to door accepting just a little bit of food from each family. Thus he should practice the occupation of the honeybee. Purport. Sometimes a honeybee is attracted by the extraordinary aroma of a particular lotus flower and lingers there, neglecting his usual activity of flying from flower to flower. Unfortunately, at sunset, the lotus flower closes, and thus the infatuated honeybee is trapped. Similarly, a sannyasi or brahmachari may discover that excellent foodstuff is available at a particular house, and therefore instead of wandering from place to place, he may become a veritable resident of such a well-fed household. Thus he will become bewildered by the illusion of family life and fall down from the platform of renunciation. Also, if a mendicant takes unfair advantage of the Vedic custom of charity and takes too often from a single family, The resentment he causes will disturb the social order. An ideal sage should, like the honeybee, travel from place to place, but he must be careful not to become a chubby bee by going to many houses and eating sumptuously at each house. According to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, such a chubby bee will undoubtedly become entangled in the network of Maya. No one should be overly attached to the gratification of his tongue, because this will lead to an overstuffed belly and thus uncontrollable lust. In conclusion, one should not endeavor very much for material sense gratification, but should instead endeavor strenuously to spread the glories of the Supreme Lord Krishna. This is the proper use of human energy.
Just as the honeybee takes nectar from all flowers, big and small, an intelligent human being should take the essence from all religious scriptures. Purport: in human society, the original knowledge is called Ved, and the essential part of Ved or knowledge is Krishna consciousness. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 15th chapter, 15th verse, Vedescha sarver ahameva vedya. From the honeybee, an intelligent human being should learn to take the essence or nectar of all knowledge. A honeybee does not waste its time trying to carry away an entire bush or garden, but rather takes the essential nectar. We may thus study the difference between the honeybee and the ass, who carries heavy loads. Education does not mean to become an intellectual ass carrying heavy loads of useless knowledge. Rather, one should accept the essential knowledge that leads to an eternal life of bliss and understanding. At the present time, people generally have a sectarian concept of religion, and yet there is no scientific understanding of the absolute truth. Such complacent, dogmatic, sectarian religionists can certainly learn something from the example of the honeybee given in this verse. A saintly person should not think, this food I will keep to eat tonight, and this other food I can save for tomorrow. In other words, a saintly person should not store foodstuffs acquired by begging. Rather, he should use his own hands as his plate and eat whatever fits on them. His only storage container should be his belly, and whatever conveniently fits into his belly should be his stock of food. Thus, one should not imitate the greedy honeybee who eagerly collects more and more honey. Purport: there are two types of honeybees: those who collect nectar from the flowers and those who actually manufacture honey in the beehive. This verse refers to the second class. The greedy honeybee eventually collects so much honey that he is trapped in his hive. And in the same way, a materialistic person becomes trapped under the burden of unnecessary material accumulation. One who is interested in making spiritual progress should avoid such a situation. However, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that for the purpose of spreading Krishna consciousness, one may accumulate an unlimited amount of material opulence. This is called Yukta Vairagya, or using everything in the service of Krishna. A saintly person who is unable to work in Lord Chaitanya's mission should practice austerities and collect only what he can hold in his hands and belly. However, one who has given his life to Krishna may collect unlimitedly on Lord Krishna's behalf. In fact, without acquiring material opulence, how is it possible to spread the Krishna consciousness movement all over the world? But if one tries to personally enjoy the funds or facilities acquired for the missionary activities of the Krishna consciousness movement, he commits the greatest offense. Therefore, even in the name of Lord Krishna, one should collect only what he can immediately engage in practical devotional service. Otherwise, one will fall down to the platform of ordinary greediness. A saintly mendicant should not even collect foodstuffs to eat later in the same day or the next day. if he disregards this injunction and like the honeybee collects more and more delicious foodstuffs, that which he has collected will indeed ruin him. Purport. Brahmara refers to that honeybee who wanders about from flower to flower, and Makshika is the honeybee who accumulates more and more honey in the beehive with a great attachment. A saintly mendicant should be like the Brahmar bee, because if he imitates the Makshika bee, his spiritual consciousness will be ruined. This point is so important that it is repeated in this verse. A saintly person should never touch a young girl. In fact, he should not even let his foot touch a wooden doll in the shape of a woman. By bodily contact with a woman, he will surely be captured by illusion. Just as the elephant is captured by the she elephant due to his desire to touch her body. Purport. Elephants are captured in the jungle in the following way. A large hole is dug and then covered over with grass, leaves, mud, and so on. Then a she elephant is exhibited in front of the male elephant, who chases after her with lusty desire, falls into the hole and is captured. The lesson to be learned from the elephant is that the desire to relish the touch sensation is certainly the cause of ruining one's life. An intelligent person, noting the elephant's great propensity to sport with the she elephant, will take this excellent example to heart. Therefore, somehow or other, one should avoid being cheated by allurement to the sensuous form of women. One should not allow one's mind to be lost in lusty dreams of sex pleasure. There are various types of sense gratification to be enjoyed between men and women, including speaking, contemplating, touching, sexual intercourse, etc. And all of these constitute the network of illusion by which one is helplessly bound like an animal. Somehow or other, one should remain aloof from sense gratification in the form of sex pleasure. Otherwise, there is no possibility of understanding the spiritual world. A man possessing intelligent. Sorry, Maharaj.
Text 14 translation. A man possessing intelligent discrimination should not, under any circumstances, try to exploit the beautiful form of a woman for his sense gratification. Just as an elephant trying to enjoy a she elephant is killed by other bull elephants, also enjoying her company, one trying to enjoy a lady's company can at any moment be killed by her other lovers who are stronger than he. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Jai Srila Prabhupada. Just as one is enchanted by the beautiful form of a woman, many other men will also be enchanted, and there is danger that they will be stronger than oneself and may even jealously kill one. Crimes of passion are extremely common. This is another disadvantage of material life. Text 15. Translation. A greedy person accumulates a large quantity of money with great struggle and pain, but the person who has struggled so much to acquire this wealth is not always allowed to enjoy it himself or give it in charity to others. The greedy man is like the bee who struggles to produce a large quantity of honey, which is then stolen by a man who will enjoy it personally or sell it to others. No matter how carefully one hides his hard-earned wealth or tries to protect it, there are those who are expert in detecting the whereabouts of valuable things, and they will steal it. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. One may argue that a wealthy man may conceal his money so expertly by investing it in banks, stocks, properties, and so on, that there is no danger of theft. Only foolish people actually hide money by burying it in the ground or placing it under a mattress. But despite the fact that the majority of the world's wealth has been accumulated in highly developed capitalistic countries, these countries are being severely challenged by many enemies who threaten at any moment to overrun the capitalists and steal their wealth. Similarly, we often find that the children of wealthy people are kidnapped and then their parents must pay huge ransoms. Sometimes the parents themselves may also be kidnapped. Furthermore, there are so-called investment counselors who are expert in stealing the money of rich people, and in the modern age, governments have also become expert in stealing money by taxation. Thus, the word earthquake indicates one who, by hook or by crook, is expert in stealing the hard-earned wealth of other people. The bees work frantically to produce honey, but they will not enjoy their honey. As Lord Krishna states, Mrityu Sarva Haras Chaha, I will come as death personified and steal everything. Bhagavad Gita 10:34. Somehow or other, one's hard-earned material opulence will be stolen. And therefore, as mentioned in this verse, one should not work uselessly like the foolish honeybee. Text 16, translation. Just as a hunter takes away the honey laboriously produced by the honeybees, similarly saintly mendicants, such as brahmacharis and sannyasis, are entitled to enjoy the property painstakingly accumulated by householders dedicated to family enjoyment. Prabhupada Srila. The scriptures state, saintly mendicants in the sannyas order of life and brahmacharis have first right to enjoy the sumptuous foodstuffs produced by the householders. If the householders enjoy such foodstuffs without first offering them in charity to the mendicants, such neglectful householders must undergo the lunar fast called Chandrayanam. In family life, one must overcome the natural tendency towards selfishness by giving abundant charity. Modern society foolishly does not observe such Vedic injunctions, and as a result, the world has become overrun by envious Grahamedis, or persons wholly and solely dedicated to personal gratification in family life. Therefore, the whole world is seized in an uncontrollable spasm of violence and suffering. If one wants to live peacefully, one must follow the Vedic injunctions regulating family life. Although the householders work very hard to accumulate money, the saintly sannyasis and brahmacharis have the right to first enjoy the fruits of such labor. The conclusion is that one should give first priority to spiritual advancement in Krishna consciousness and thus perfect one's life. Then, even without personal endeavor, one will be supplied all of one's necessities by the mercy of the personality of Godhead. Text 17. A saintly person dwelling in the forest in the renounced order of life should never listen to songs or music promoting material enjoyment. Rather, a saintly person should carefully study the example of the deer, who is bewildered by the sweet music of the hunter's horn and is thus captured and killed. Prabhupada. If one becomes attached to the sense gratification of materialistic music and songs, one will develop all the features of material entanglement. One should hear Bhagavad Gita or the song sung by the Supreme Lord. Text 18. Becoming attached to the worldly singing, dancing, and musical entertainment of beautiful women, even the great sage Vishranga, the son of Mrigi, fell totally under their control just like a pet per professional Prabhat. Syasringa, the young son of the sage Mrigi, was intentionally brought up by his father in an atmosphere of complete innocence. Mrigi Rishi thought that if his son were never exposed to the sight of women, he would always remain a perfect brahmachari. But by chance, the inhabitants of the neighboring kingdom, who were suffering from a long-term drought, received divine advice that rain would return to their kingdom only after the Brahmana named Syasringa set foot in it. Therefore, they sent beautiful women to the hermitage of Mrigi to entice Syasringa and bring him back with them. Since Syasringa had never even heard about women, he easily fell for their trap. The name Syasringa indicates that the young sage was born with a deer-like horn growing out of his forehead. If, like the deer, a rishi becomes attracted to sweet musical sounds promising sense gratification, then, like the deer, he is quickly vanquished. A thoughtful person should humbly take instruction from the deer. who is doomed by attraction to musical sense gratification. Text 19. Just as a fish, incited by the desire to enjoy his tongue, is fatly trapped on the fisherman's hook, similarly, a foolish person is bewildered by the extremely disturbing urges of the tongue and thus is ruined. Purport by Srila Prabhupada, the fisherman places meaty bait on a sharp hook and easily attracts the unintelligent fish who is greedy to enjoy its tongue. Similarly, people are mad after gratifying their tongues and lose all discrimination in their eating habits. For momentary gratification, they construct huge slaughterhouses and kill millions of innocent creatures, and by inflicting such atrocious suffering, they prepare a ghastly future for themselves. But even if one eats only the foods authorized in the Vedas, there is still danger. One may eat too sumptuously, and then the artificially stuffed belly will create pressure on the sexual organs. Thus, one will fall down into the lower modes of nature and commit sinful activities that lead to the death of one's spiritual life. From the fish, one should carefully learn the real dangers involved in gratifying the tongue. Text 20. By fasting, learned men quickly bring all of the senses except the tongue under control, because by abstaining from eating, such men are afflicted with an increased desire to gratify the sense of taste. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In South America, there is a saying that when the belly is full, the heart is content. Thus, one is eating sumptuously is jolly, and if one is deprived of proper food, one's appetite becomes even more voracious. An intelligent person, however, does not fall under the control of the tongue, but rather tries to make progress in Krishna consciousness. By accepting the remnants of food offered to the Lord, prasadam, one gradually purifies the heart and automatically becomes simple and austere. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur states that the business of the tongue is to gratify itself with the varieties of flavor, but by wandering in the 12 holy forests of Vrajamandal, Vrindavan, one can be freed from the 12 flavors of material sense gratification. The 5 principal divisions of material relationships are neutral admiration, servitude, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. The 7 subordinate features of material relationships are material humor, astonishment, chivalry, compassion, anger, dread, and ghastliness. Originally, these 12 rasas or flavors of relationships are exchanged between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the living entity in the spiritual world. And by wandering in the 12 forests of Vrindavan, when one can re-spiritualize the 12 flavors of personal existence. Thus, thus one will become a liberated soul, free from all material desires. If one artificially tries to give up sense gratification, especially that of the tongue, the attempt will be a failure. And in fact, one's desire for sense gratification will increase as a result of artificial deprivation. Only by experiencing real spiritual pleasure in relationship with Krishna can one give up material desires. Text 21. Although one may conquer all of the other senses, as long as the tongue is not conquered, it cannot be said that one has controlled his senses. However, if one is able to control the tongue, then one is understood to be in full control of all the senses. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. By eating, one gives energy and activity to all of the senses. And thus, if the tongue is uncontrolled, all of the senses will be dragged down to the material platform of existence. Therefore, by all means, one must control the tongue. If one fasts, then all of the other senses become weak and lose their potency. The tongue, however, becomes more greedy to taste delicious preparations. And when one finally indulges the tongue, all of the senses quickly go out of control. Therefore, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's advice is that one accept Mahaprasadam or the remnants of the Lord's food in a moderate proportion. Since the tongue's function is also to vibrate, one should vibrate the glorious holy name of the Supreme Lord and taste the ecstasy of pure Krishna consciousness. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Rasa Brajam Raso Api Asya Param Drishtva Nivartate. Only by the higher taste of Krishna consciousness can one give up the deadly lower taste that keeps one imprisoned in material bondage. Text 22. O son of kings, previously in the seat of Videha, there dwelt a prostitute named Pingla. Now please hear what I have learned from that lady. Text 23. Once that prostitute, desiring to bring a lover into her house, stood outside in the doorway at night, showing her beautiful form. Text 24. O best among men, this prostitute was very anxious to get money, and as she stood on the street at night, she studied all the men who were passing by, thinking, "Oh, this one surely has money. I know he can pay the price, and I'm sure he will enjoy my company very much." Thus she thought about all the men on the street. Text 25-26. As the prostitute Pingla stood in the doorway, many men came and went, walking by her house. Her only means of sustenance was prostitution, and therefore she anxiously thought, maybe this one who is coming now is very rich. Oh, he is not stopping, but I am sure someone else will come. Surely this man who is coming now will want to pay me for my love, and he will probably give lots of money. Thus, with vain hope, she remained leaning against the doorway, unable to finish her business and go to sleep. Out of anxiety, she would sometimes walk out toward the street, and sometimes she went back into her house. In this way, the midnight hour gradually arrived. Text 27. As the night wore on, the prostitute who intensely desired money gradually became morose, and her face dried up. Thus, being filled with anxiety for money and most disappointed, she began to feel a great detachment from her situation, and happiness arose in her mind. Purport. It appears from these verses that on this particular night, the prostitute Pingla was not at all successful in attracting customers to her house. Being completely frustrated and disappointed, she gradually became indifferent to her situation. Thus, great suffering sometimes leads one to the path of enlightenment. Or, according to a Sanskrit proverb, disappointment gives rise to the greatest satisfaction. The prostitute had dedicated her life to satisfying the lusty desires of many men. Engaging her mind, body, and words in the service of paying lovers, she completely forgot the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and thus her mind was most unsteady and disturbed. Finally, being completely frustrated, her face and throat drying up, she began to feel indifferent to her situation, and happiness arose in her mind. Text 28, translation. The prostitute felt disgusted with her material situation and thus became indifferent to it. Indeed, detachment acts like a sword, cutting to pieces the binding network of material hopes and desires. Now please hear from me the song sung by the prostitute in that situation. The network of material desires is created when one falsely thinks that he can establish himself permanently in the material world. This binding network should be cut by the sword of detachment. Otherwise, one will be forced to wander in the illusory network of Maya with no understanding of liberated life on the spiritual platform. Text 29. O king, just as a man being who is bereft of spiritual knowledge never desires to give up his false sense of proprietorship over many material things, similarly, a person who has not developed detachment never desires to give up the bondage of the material body.
The prostitute Pingala said, "Just see how greatly illusioned I am, because I cannot control my mind. Just like a fool, I desire lusty pleasure from an insignificant man." Purport. In material existence, all of the senses are attracted by different objects, and thus the conditioned soul becomes a first-class fool. The cause of material life is one's indifference to the absolute truth. The conditioned soul considers himself to be the lord and enjoyer of the material world, and considers the purpose of life to be sense gratification. The more one tries to enjoy the material world, the more one's illusion increases. I am such a fool that I have given up the service of that person who, being eternally situated within my heart, is actually most dear to me. That most dear one is the Lord of the universe, who is the bestower of real love and happiness, and the source of all prosperity. Although he is in my own heart, I have completely neglected him. Instead, I have ignorantly served insignificant men who can never satisfy my real desires, and who have simply brought me unhappiness, fear, anxiety, lamentation, and illusion. Purport. Pingala laments that she chose to serve most sinful, useless men. She falsely thought they would bring her happiness and neglected to serve the actual Lord of the heart, Krishna. She could understand how foolishly she had struggled for money, not knowing that the Supreme Lord is always inclined to award prosperity to his sincere devotee. The prostitute was proud of her ability to please men, but she now laments that she did not try to please the Supreme Lord by loving service. The Supreme Lord is completely aloof from the transactions of the material world. Lord Krishna is the actual enjoyer of everyone and everything, but one must learn how to please the Lord by pure spiritual service. Oh, how I have uselessly tortured my own soul. I have sold my body to lusty, greedy men who are themselves objects of pity, thus practicing the most abominable profession of a prostitute. I hoped to get money and sex pleasure. The art of prostitution is based on awakening the enjoying propensity in men. Apparently, this prostitute was so foolish that she maintained a romantic conception of her profession and was actually trying to enjoy loving affairs with her customers, not realizing that they were the lowest of men with the most abominable motives. Like the prostitute Pingala, one should understand that by giving up the devotional service of the Lord, one simply becomes the victim of illusory energy and suffers greatly. This material body is like a house in which I, the soul, am living. The bones forming my spine, ribs, arms, and legs are like the beams, crossbeams, and pillars of the house. And the whole structure, which is full of stool and urine, is covered by skin, hair, and nails. The 9 doors leading into this body are constantly excreting foul substances. Besides me, what woman could be so foolish as to devote herself to this material body, thinking that she might find pleasure and love in this contraption? The 9 doors leading into and out of the body are the 2 eyes, the 2 nostrils, the mouth, the 2 ears, the genitals, and the anus. Vangsha or spine also means bamboo, and indeed the skeleton appears to resemble a bamboo construction. Just as bamboo can be immediately burned to ashes or chopped into pieces, similarly the material body, which is constantly deteriorating, may at any moment be crushed into powder, cut into pieces, drowned, burned, suffocated, and so on. Eventually, the body must disintegrate, and therefore there is certainly no one as unfortunate as one who has dedicated himself heart and soul to this flimsy body, which is filled with unpleasant elements. Certainly in this city of Videha, I alone am completely foolish. I neglected the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who awards us everything, even our original spiritual form, and indeed I desire to enjoy sense gratification with many men. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is absolutely the most dear one for all living beings, because He is everyone's well-wisher and Lord. He is the Supreme Soul situated in everyone's heart. Therefore I will now pay the price of complete surrender, and thus purchasing the Lord, I will enjoy with Him, just like Lakshmi Devi. The real friend of all conditioned souls is the Supreme Lord, and only He can award the highest perfection in life. By following the example of Lakshmi Devi, who always remains at the lotus feet of the Lord, one will certainly attain eternal happiness. One should make the best use of the material body, which is a bad bargain, and surrender one's body, mind, and words to the Lord. Paying such a price, one can purchase the Lord, who is everyone's dearmost well-wisher. Thus, one's ancient propensity for sense gratification will automatically be controlled. Men provide sense gratification for women, but all these men, and even the demigods in heaven, have a beginning and an end. They are all temporary creatures who will be dragged away by time. Therefore, how much actual pleasure or happiness could any of them ever give to their wives? In this mature world, everyone is basically pursuing his personal sense gratification, and thus everyone is being ruined by the influence of time. On the material platform, no one can actually help. On the material platform, no one actually helps anyone else. So-called material love is simply a cheating process, as the Lady Pingala is now discovering. Although I most stubbornly hope to enjoy the material world, some or other detachment has arisen in my heart, and it is making me very happy. Therefore, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, must be pleased with me. Without even knowing it, I must have performed some activity satisfying to him. A person who has developed detachment can give up the bondage of material society, friendship, and love. And a person who undergoes great suffering gradually becomes, out of hopelessness, detached and indifferent to the material world. Thus, due to my great suffering, such detachment awoke in my heart. Yet, how could I have undergone such merciful suffering if I were actually unfortunate? Therefore, I am in fact fortunate and have received the mercy of the Lord. He must somehow or other be pleased with me. With devotion, I accept the great benefit that the Lord has bestowed upon me, having given up my sinful desires. For ordinary sense gratification, I now take shelter of Him, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I am now completely satisfied and have full faith in the Lord's mercy. Therefore, I will maintain myself with whatever comes of its own accord. I shall enjoy life with only the Lord, because He is the real source of love and happiness. The intelligence of the living entity is stolen away by activities of sense gratification, and thus he falls into the dark well of material existence. Within that well, he is then seized by the deadly serpent of time. Who else but the Supreme Personality of Godhead could save the poor living entity from such a hopeless condition? For Pingala stated in a previous verse that even the demigods are unable to give actual happiness to a woman. One may question who has authorized this lady to reject even such exalted personalities such as Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods. The answer given here is that if one actually wants to solve all the problems of life and go back home, back to Godhead, then the only solution is to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. It is well known that the demigods themselves are subject to birth and death. As stated by Lord Shiva himself, Mukti Pradata Sarvesham Vishnu Eva Nasanshaya. There is no doubt that Vishnu is the deliverer of liberation for everyone.
When the living entity sees that the entire universe has been seized by the serpent of time, he becomes sober and sane, and at the time detaches himself from all material sense gratification. In that condition, the living entity is qualified to be his own protector. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. In this verse, Pingala states that by the Lord's mercy, a self-realized soul can see that the entire universe is existing within the jaws of the great serpent of time. Certainly, this is not a promising situation, and one who sees it loses his desire for sense gratification. Thus, by the Lord's causeless mercy, the spiritually sane living entity can protect himself from illusion. The Avdut said, thus her mind completely made up, Pingla cut off all her sinful desires to enjoy sex pleasure with lovers, and she became situated in perfect peace. Then she sat down on her bed. Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. Therefore, completely cutting off her desire to enjoy so called lovers, Pingla very happily went to sleep. Thus end the purport of the humble servant of His Divine Grace, S.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, to the 11th canto, 8th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Story of Pingla.
किचन में पानी होगा, 2 लोग पानी होगा, किचन में नेट लगा होगा, गूगल
अरे नया मॉडल में आ रहा है। नया फोन में देख लो। इधर आ, इधर बांसुरी गिर गया है, इनका है ना, नीचे गिर गया है। इधर आ, सामान नीचे से हटा के देखो बांसुरी गिर गया है। ठीक है, धन्यवाद। बोला तो कोई बोतल निकालना अंदर घुस गए। बोतल निकालो।
नहीं उधर चला गया
अंदर पक्का
पक्का है दिख रहा है देख तो नहीं रहे अंदाजा लगा रहा है ना आप कहाँ घुसे
कहाँ स्टिक लेके आओ। पीछे गिर गया इसका, बैक में गिर गया होगा।
कहते कि मैंने देखा था बीच में लेकिन गिरा था यहाँ पर
इधर से इधर या फिर गमला में तो नहीं आ गया इसमें। इसमें हाँ, क्योंकि जाएगा तो इधर या उधर या इसमें जाएगा ना, या इसमें।
देखिए आपने बाबा की राशि
और तुलसी मिल गया तुलसी कहाँ है?
December. Go to time.
कैसे माला करनी है इससे?
तुलसी हो पाओगे तो होता तुलसी होता है क्या बात बोलते ना
होगा ना?
तुलसी को
लेके जाना है, ठीक है? ये भी लेके जाना। सुनो सुनो,
terus. Mereka nampaknya sedang kan. Ya bro.
आरती लीजिए आरती